Interesting too that you mention Michael Voss's name, because he's obviously now the new Carlton coach, along with Sam Mitchell, a new coach at Hawthorn. Now, Malcolm Blight is the only Brownlow medalist to ever coach a VFL AFL flag since Dick Reynolds, who did it 4 times between 1942 and 50 as a player coach, which I thought was a little interesting fact. So now Michael Voss and Sam Mitchell both hope to buck that trend, and they now take over the reins at their clubs and will be needing to make their mark as soon as possible, won't they?
It is amazing to think that, isn't it? I don't know what it leads back to. It was the trend in the 70s and 80s, and there's a carryover to it even now, that they have the dour back top pocket type of player be the head of your footy club. Lee Matthews was the outrider, but he didn't win a Brownlow. I mean, he could have and should have, but he didn't. But when it comes to the official sort of lining up of Brownlow medalists with coaches, you're right about Malcolm Blight being the only genius who's been able to do it. There's no reason that Sam Mitchell won't be believing he can do it, taking over from one of those dour type of players, not necessarily a back pocket in Alistair Clarkson, but a dour type of player. And that old theory, Nat, that the genius football talents can't relate to the battlers, and then when it comes to the control of a footy club and the control of, say, a list of 45, they eventually get there, but sometimes it's too late. Can't relate to the flaws within a player's makeup when it comes to the football side of it. And they just don't realise that some people aren't wired the way they are as players to be the best they can be every single time. So look, we could debate this for basically weeks and maybe not even get to the bottom of it, but the facts show that the game's greatest players they just don't translate into being premiership coaches.
Well, let's see if Voss and Mitchell can potentially buck the trend. When you look at Sam Mitchell and the Hawks, I guess going into this trade period, there's not a lot of movement. Obviously, the Hawks wanting to go to the draft. There's been so much talk about, could they trade out a big name? What's your sense with Hawthorn and Sam Mitchell, and in terms of him making his mark on this side very early on?
I just see him as a person who will do it for the right reasons, but will go out of his way to show internally the Hawthorn people that this is a very different Hawthorn footy club right now with him in charge of it. And he won't be doing that for any gratuitous reasons. He'll be doing it because he will take the view that, right, this footy club is now invested in me. They've invested in me because I bring this quality set to the table, and as such, I am going to make moves straight away. So that's the overriding, I feel to what lies ahead with it. And then we get into the immediacy around that, Nat. They've got a trade period which has got it's got a week to run as we talk. It'll be close of play Wednesday next week in the evening. They're not giving the impression that they're going to be massive players, but they're going to need to make some changes. They'll be Sam Mitchell-led changes, as they should and need to be. And you just look at a couple of bigger names on the list, Nat, they're aligned with the previous coach. They being Jager O'Meara, Chad Wingard, and Tom Mitchell. Now, they're all very, very good players. Mitchell's adding another best and fairest to his CV this year. Wingard having, I thought, Nat, a pretty good, in fact, a very good second half of the year. And O'Meara, who, again, for all his faults in terms of maybe not being the player that he was going to be before he got struck down with 2 serious knee injuries as a Gold Coast Sun, is still a very, very high-end midfielder. You throw Jack Gunston into the list too, and that's the one that intrigues me. If he's back is okay, and there's a big question mark about that, he to me is the one who could find himself at a new home come close of play Wednesday week. That's the way I read that now.
Yeah, look, I mean, if you have to trade one of them, and I personally, if I was in Sam Mitchell's shoes, I wouldn't be trading any of them. But if I had to trade one of them, it's probably Jack Gunston that has the most worth, the most value right now, if, as you say, his back is okay. Tom Mitchell's the other one, but I mean, he won another best and fairest at the Hawks this year. He racks it up, we know that, but in terms of his disposal, sometimes is he that damaging? I'm not sure if he's still right at the top of his game. A terrific player though, and I mean he could offer a side like a Port Adelaide potentially a little bit of extra depth in their midfield. But certainly with those 4 or 3 out of the 4, if you take out Jack Gunston, who has obviously had premiership success, they all came to Hawthorn looking for the ultimate success and haven't been able to find it. So if they are to be traded out, they're going to want to be traded to clubs who are contending, aren't they? And in that premiership window, and are they going to have the picks to offer Hawthorn what they want? And that's the biggest question.
You'd think so. And you need to, I think, factor in that the lifestyle choice the four of them have all made to be in Melbourne. They've all made that decision as much as the footy decision. Just Mitchell, Nat, it's going to be so interesting to watch how this unfolds. He's got the luxury of time. Every new coach does. He might even have the luxury of more time than most. I usually refer to an 18-month honeymoon period for a new coach. I reckon Mitchell at Hawthorn might have 2.5, 3 years. They will allow him to do what he wants to do until it becomes crisis time. But he'll back himself to make significant change in that immediately. I mean, he will want to have his own look on that team. And again, none of this is gratuitous, but we know the way he's wired. And Amira, Wingard, Mitchell particularly are Alistair Clarkson appointments. And again, he's not going to go in as the outset, I need to make a change for that being the sake of it. But there's no tie, or the ties of those players to that club is nowhere near as strong as it was now that Alistair Clarkson is not there. And there's a new set of eyes on how they perform within that mix. And I'd expect all of them to be used differently, just subtly, because we're dealing with, as we said and started this conversation off, and that this is a Brownlow medalist who is taking over this footy club. He knows how the midfield works, and he's got some elite talent at his disposal, but it's talent that may still, in the next 7 to 8 days, be appealing in a nature enough for him to be open to seeing what it means for Hawthorn from a draft pick number going into this year's draft.
Well, we will continue to watch this space when it comes to Hawthorn and the trade period.